You have one guy who wants to take over our country. It's our country. It's a place where we were raised and born. People lived in Greenland.
It's a shock to all of us that an American president can even get ideas like this.
Let me start with something that sounds like a joke, but is not a joke. The chaos you're seeing right now, the rage, the protests, the cold streets filled with thousands of people chanting like their lives depend on it, is not Moscow. It's not Tehran. It's not Pyongyang. This time, the fire is burning right inside NATO's living room, Denmark. One of America's closest allies, one of the most stable countries on Earth, a place where people normally argue politely and then go home to drink coffee and pay high taxes without complaining. But now Copenhagen is packed with Greenland flags. Now the US Embassy is facing marching crowds. Now, even in Nuuk, in the kind of cold that makes your bones beg for mercy, people are standing outside, holding vigils, chanting, refusing to be silenced. And the reason for this explosion is one sentence. A sentence that sounds like it came from the 1800s. The United States should acquire Greenland. Washington thought this would be simple. A deal, a transaction. They assumed it could be handled the old-fashioned way. Put money on the table, shake hands, smile for the cameras, and own the territory. Basically, the Alaska model. But on January 17th, reality slapped that calculation across the face. Because Greenland is not a house you can buy. It's not a business you can acquire. It's not a piece of land waiting to be flipped like real estate. Greenland is a people, and right now they're saying, loud and clear, Kalalit Nunat, land of the people, not land of the buyers. According to field reports, we're talking about over 20,000 protesters in Copenhagen marching directly to the US Embassy with Greenland flags. And at the same time, in Nuuk, in minus 20 degrees, Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen and the Speaker of Parliament personally joined a public vigil outside the US consulate. That's not normal. When heads of government step into the crowd like that, it's not because they want photos. It's because the situation is serious enough that staying silent becomes dangerous. And listen, this is one of the most powerful details in your raw script. The protesters weren't shouting in English. They were shouting in Kala Alasut, their language. That's not accidental. That is a strategic message. It means, we will not negotiate our identity in a language you understand. It's basically Greenland telling Washington, you cannot buy what you cannot even understand. Now let's talk about the hats. Because honestly, the hats might be the single greatest insult of this whole crisis. People showed up wearing red caps, the same style as Trump's MAGA hats. But instead of Make America Great Again, these ones read Make America Go Away. That is not hatred. That is elite-level mockery. It's the kind of humor that tells you, we're not afraid of you anymore. That hat is Greenland and Denmark basically saying, you can bring your superpower status, bring your money, bring your threats, bring your drill baby drill, but please, take your ego and go home. And the thing is, those hats became a symbol because they captured the real feeling, not fear, confidence, national anger with a smile. Now here's something we need to be honest about. This is not Greenland hating American citizens. Most Greenlanders don't wake up thinking about America. Their anger is not against ordinary Americans. Their anger is against the tone of Washington right now, the language of control, the idea that sovereignty can be bought like an iPhone. And Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen made it even clearer when he basically ended the polite diplomacy. We choose Denmark, we choose NATO, we choose the Kingdom of Denmark, we choose the EU. Translation, we already chose our future. You are late. That wasn't just political messaging. That was a declaration of identity. After that statement, you would expect the White House to calm things down, to say something respectful, to play it safe. But no, Trump replied, and I'm going to paraphrase the brutal spirit of it. That's their problem. I don't know who he is, but it's going to be a big problem for him. That is not diplomacy. That's a threat wrapped in arrogance. That is basically telling Greenland, your will doesn't matter. Your leaders don't matter. And if there's one thing history has taught us, the fastest way to create resistance is to treat people like they're irrelevant. Greenlanders are not confused. They're not undecided. They're not sitting at home thinking, should we join America? No. Surveys and field analysis show around 85% reject becoming US citizens. And why? Because Greenlanders see the US model as risky. They look at America and they see expensive healthcare, high inequality, political chaos, social tension, people working 2 jobs and still struggling. They look at Denmark and they see free education, universal healthcare, strong welfare protections, predictable stability. So they are basically saying, why would we trade a safety net for a roller coaster? This is not emotional only. It is rational. It is Greenland choosing the Scandinavian social model over savage capitalism. Here's the other major reason for the uprising. Greenland fears the land will be turned into a corporate quarry. Trump's drill baby drill energy works politically in parts of America. But for Greenland, that's not a slogan. That's a nightmare. Because Greenland is not just ice and snow. It's ancestral survival. It's a fragile ecosystem where the land feeds the people, where nature isn't scenery, it's life. They are not trying to become the next oil playground. They do not want their glaciers replaced with mining pits. So when Washington starts talking about strategic minerals, control, dominance, Greenland hears something else. We will dig until your homeland bleeds. And this is why this has become a survival issue, not just politics. Now here is where it gets truly ironic. This whole crisis isn't only shaking Denmark, it's shaking Washington too. Because it turns out, even Americans are not excited about this. A Reuters Ipsos poll found only 17% of Americans support acquiring Greenland. That is insanely low, and it gets worse. The poll shows overwhelming opposition to using military force, meaning Americans are basically saying, we are not fighting our NATO friends over ice. After Vietnam, after Iraq, after Afghanistan, American society has developed what I would call war fatigue immunity. The appetite for a new adventure is gone. And because the public doesn't support it, now US politicians are panicking. Members of Congress are reportedly drafting laws that would block federal funding for military action against Denmark. Think about that for a second. The US Congress is preparing for the possibility that a US president could attempt a confrontation with a NATO ally. That is not normal. That is historic. That is a crack inside the Western alliance itself. And this is where the story starts becoming bigger than Greenland. Because once NATO members start threatening each other, even verbally, the entire global power balance shifts. At this point, Greenland is no longer the full story. Greenland is the spark. The real story is this. The world is entering a new era where powerful nations are testing the old rules. And when the biggest nation starts acting like the rules don't matter, everyone gets nervous. Because today, it's Greenland. Tomorrow, it could be something else. And suddenly, every small country starts asking, are we safe or are we next? So now the question becomes, if Greenland is not for sale, and Denmark refuses to bend, and Americans themselves don't support the push, then why is this crisis still growing? What is Trump really trying to achieve here? And most importantly, how does this connect to the wider global chessboard, including China, Russia, Africa, and the new scramble for strategic resources? Because make no mistake, Greenland is not the final destination. Greenland is the doorway. If you ever wanted to see what a real political emergency looks like in Washington, no Hollywood music, no dramatic slow motion, this is it. Congress is trying to stop a president from moving toward a confrontation with a NATO ally by cutting off the money. That sounds technical, right? Like paperwork. But it's actually one of the sharpest knives in the American Constitution. Because in the US system, the president may be commander-in-chief, but Congress controls the wallet. And when Congress says, no funding, that's democracy's version of grabbing the steering wheel before the car hits the wall. And that's exactly what's happening now. This is a rare moment in US history, and that's fair. When lawmakers start talking about banning funds to prevent military actions, it means the alarm bells are no longer ringing, they're screaming. Senator Jeanne Shaheen and Senator Lisa Murkowski have been publicly tied to legislation meant to block funding for any attempt to assert control over NATO territory, language that's not subtle at all. And the logic is brutally simple. If the executive branch can't access money for the operation, then it can't do the operation. No fuel, no deployment, no oops, we accidentally escalated. Even conservative-leaning outlets in Alaska have described Murkowski's stance as a direct warning that this would shatter NATO unity and hand wins to Russia and China. So yes, Washington is starting to look like a government arguing with itself in real time. One side says, stop. The other says, move. And the world is watching this like a live courtroom drama where the judge and the lawyer are yelling at each other and the jury is just blinking. Now here's where it stops being a debate and starts looking like an ultimatum battle. According to reporting, Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have met with Danish officials amid Trump's renewed push to acquire Greenland. That's not a casual meeting. That's the kind of meeting you hold when your position is, we're not leaving this table without a result. And when the agenda becomes handover or anything that smells like it, you're no longer in diplomacy, you're in pressure politics. Which is exactly why Congress is reacting the way it is. Because if you pressure an ally hard enough, the alliance stops being an alliance. It becomes a hostage situation with nice suits. Trump keeps reaching for the Alaska story. He loves the simplicity of it. We bought Alaska in 1867 for $7.2 million. Boom. Done. But history isn't just numbers. That purchase happened in a different world, an era when people weren't asked for consent the way we understand it now, and when great powers treated geography like chess pieces. Even back then, Alaska was mocked as Seward's folly, but it later became strategically valuable. Here's the problem for Trump. Greenland is not 1867, and Greenlanders are not assets. They're not territory. They are a people with a language, identity, institutions, and a clear political will. And they're saying, in plain terms, we are not for sale. And if you want proof this isn't just a European mood, look at American public opinion. A Reuters Ipsos poll summary and the Ipsos release are striking. Only 17% of Americans approve of U.S. efforts to acquire Greenland, and support for using military force is overwhelmingly rejected. So Trump is pushing a project that Greenlanders reject, Denmark rejects, much of Europe rejects, and Americans also mostly reject. That's not bold leadership. That's what you do when you're trying to win an argument by shouting louder than reality. In 1946, the U.S. did float a purchase idea. Reporting and historical accounts describe an offer of $100 million, and Denmark said no. Truman didn't threaten Denmark. He didn't hint at force. The alliance didn't break. So the difference isn't that America never wanted Greenland. The difference is how. Truman heard no and kept the alliance intact. Trump hears no and treats it like an insult that must be punished. And that is why this is escalating into something NATO has rarely faced, internal deterrence. Now let's talk about the scene that feels like a scriptwriter would reject it for being too unrealistic. European troops arriving in Greenland, officially for exercises, yes, but in a political moment like this, everything has a second meaning. Associated Press reporting described French elements already en route and noted German deployments connected to activity on the island, framed as exercises. To be clear, nobody is calling this Europe versus America officially. But symbolism doesn't need permission. When allies start positioning forces in sensitive spaces, especially around a sovereignty dispute, the message is, don't try it. And if you're Trump, that's humiliating. Not because of the troops themselves, but because of what they represent. Europe is starting to behave like it may need protection from the US, not with the US. That sentence alone should make NATO strategists feel sick. When military pathways get blocked, by Congress, by allies, by public opinion, Trump does what Trump does. He grabs the economic bat. Reuters reported Trump vowed additional tariffs on multiple European nations tied to the Greenland dispute, starting with a 10% layer and escalating up to 25% later if no deal is reached. This is not policy. This is coercion. And it's the kind of coercion that can spark a trade war even among partners, exactly when global trade is already fragile. And Europe's response has been unusually direct. Reuters reported European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen emphasizing Denmark and Greenland's sovereignty as non-negotiable, while also talking about an EU package around Arctic security and investment. And other reporting has described European leaders treating this less like a negotiation and more like an attempted precedent. Because if a superpower can pressure an ally into handing over territory, what's the point of alliances at all? That's how alliances die, not with a bang, but with humiliation. So why is all this happening? Is it pride? Is it profit? Is it just a political show? It's all of that. But under it is something very real. Greenland is strategic. Not just because it's huge and icy, but because it sits on critical Arctic geography, potential mineral wealth, and a future shipping map that climate change is rewriting. Rare earth elements matter because they are used in modern tech, from phones to advanced defense systems. China has dominated parts of the supply chain for years, and that creates anxiety in Washington. Then there's the Arctic shipping picture. As ice melts, routes that once seemed fantasy become shorter pathways between Asia and Europe. So Trump's argument is, if we don't lock this down, China and Russia will. But Greenlanders aren't buying that logic, because to them it sounds like we must exploit you to protect you. And that sentence is how empires talk, not allies. This is the part that hits hardest. Greenlanders are not saying no because they don't understand strategy. They're saying no because they understand what happens when the global machine decides your homeland is a resource depot. They see drill baby drill, and they don't see prosperity. They see mining scars, environmental damage, and a future where their children inherit a land that looks like a used battlefield. So they push back, not with weapons, but with dignity. Not with hate, but with humor. That's why a cap that says, "Make America Go Away" became iconic. It's resistance without the ugliness. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Even if this crisis cools down, NATO will not be the same. Trust is the currency of alliances. And right now, that trust is being spent like it's unlimited. Meanwhile, Russia and China don't even need to lift a finger to enjoy this. Division inside NATO is a strategic gift. And here's what Greenland's message has become. Bigger than Greenland. A small nation saying, we may be few, but we're not for sale. That's why this isn't a property dispute. It's a clash between an older mindset where power buys everything and a newer reality where identity and sovereignty are not negotiable. So let me leave you with this. If the world's strongest alliance can be shaken by a territorial push against one of its own, what does that say about the world we're entering? Is this just a one-off storm? Or the beginning of a new era where allies are treated like bargaining chips? Now I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Greenland is right to resist, no matter what? Or do you think the strategic argument changes everything? And please support the work. Like the video and subscribe to the channel so you stay updated, because this story is not over.